everyone, welcome back to the channel. I gave Cade the day off today. No, just kidding. He's actually at the gym training. But in today's video, I wanted to share with you 5 tennis books you must read in 2021. Today I'm going to share with you what I loved about each book and a favorite quote from each book that resonated with me. So to start, the first book I would recommend is Open, an autobiography of Andre Agassi. And I read this book probably about 10 years ago now, or 8 or 10 years ago. And the one thing I loved about this book is it made me realize as a parent with a child just getting into tennis that Andre Agassi, when he was growing up as a child, he was kind of somewhat forced into playing tennis a little bit. And it shared in the book his story about how his dad would take him out on the court and just have the dragon, they called the ball machine, just pounding balls at Andre at the fastest speeds as possible, trying to gear him up. And as he grew as a child, he ended up going to IMG Academy, and he trained with like Courier and Sampras, and it kind of talked about the inner battles there, you know, what it was like being at an academy. And it really was a love-hate relationship for the game of tennis for Andre. It was a great book. It kind of shared that experience of, you know, maybe if you push too much as a parent on a child in a certain sport, it can have certain effects. But overall, a really good read. And my favorite quote from the book is actually one that Andre shared, and it's this: "Only boxers can understand the loneliness of tennis players, and yet boxers have their cornermen and managers. Even a boxer's opponents provides a kind of companionship, someone he can grapple with and grunt at. In tennis, you stand face to face with the enemy, trade blows with him, but never touch him or talk to him or anyone else. The rules forbid a tennis player from even talking to his coach while on court. People sometimes mention the track and field runner as a comparably lonely figure, but I have to laugh. At least the runner can feel and smell his opponents. They're inches away. In tennis, you're on an island. Of all the games men and women play, tennis is the closest to solitary confinement." When I read that quote, I was like, wow. You know, coming from playing hockey, a team sport, tennis really is a lonely sport, and you do really have to solve a lot of problems on your own. And Andre did a great job sharing that in that quote. The second book I'm going to recommend is Rafa. And this is another autobiography of Rafa Nadal. And this book I read actually, I think 2 or 3 years ago. And it's kind of dated a bit, so it's not recent of Rafa's, of his career so far, but it does talk a lot about him as a junior, when he was training in Mallorca, how he trained with Carlos Moya, actually when he was younger, and hitting with him a few times a week. It talked about how Rafa loves his family and how different he is actually as a player and as a person off the court. He's very nervous, anxious off the court, but when he goes on court, he's like a warrior, as we all know. So it's a great read, and it really shows how important family is when a young athlete is growing up trying to chase a sport that they love. Rafa always speaks about how the support of his family has been very important to him, and it shows even to this day how he still has his family on his team and surrounding him at all times. My favorite quote from the Rafa book is this one here: "I learned that you always have to hang in there, that however remote your chances are of winning might seem, you have to push yourself to the very limit of your abilities and to try your luck. That day in Melbourne, I saw more clearly than ever before that the key to this game resides in the mind. And if the mind is clear and strong, you can overcome almost any obstacle, including pain. Mind can triumph over matter." So that's a great quote. As a player, I think if we can get a smidgen of what Rafa has when it comes to mind over matter, definitely going to help us. The third book I'm going to recommend for reading in 2021 is Winning Ugly: The Mental Warfare in Tennis. Cade and I talked about this book as one of our 8 favorite resources in one of our videos that I'll link up here. But Brad Gilbert wrote this book, and as a parent who didn't come from a tennis background, I was trying to figure out this game, and I thought, this book I need to read, because Brad Gilbert shares a lot about tactics and strategy that any tennis player, coach, parent would want to understand and learn from him. So Brad was, I think, ranked as high as number 4 in the world. He went on to coach actually Andre Agassi and lead him to be number 1 in the world and win multiple Grand Slam titles with him. In this book though, he shares a lot of clever tips that you would never think of as a club player or as a junior, growing up through the ranks. He talks about like why you should actually not serve first before every match because you maybe aren't warmed up, don't have any rhythm. You can maybe break early on. He shares some other amazing tips and strategies that help players win matches. And it's not really about the technique or how pretty you look on the court. He's teaching us how to win matches ugly. And it's a great book that you definitely need to pick up if you haven't read it yet. And one of my favorite quotes from Brad's book, Winning Ugly, is the following. Now, let's focus on one aspect of another female superstar's greatness that you should bring into your game, or rather into your head. Serena Williams, and Venus too, have serious short-term memory loss. By that, I mean when things go bad in a point, game, set, or match, they have this ability to mentally wipe the slate clean, to forget about it immediately and not get ruined. Club players, when we miss a few shots and lose a couple of games, and it gets in our mind, we lose confidence, get rattled, and dial it down. Believe me, I know. That was me on tour plenty of times. As you'll read later in Winning Ugly, when you get down on yourself, start beating yourself up mentally, there are now 2 players on the court trying to take you down, and you are one of them. So even that quote by Brad there is a great tip for young players or parents watching or juniors, So what if you lose a match or you lose a point or you lose a couple points? As Cade and I always talk about, you're gonna probably lose 50% of the points when you start playing tennis against people that are comparative to your level. So it's okay, don't let it rattle you. As Brad said, have a short-term memory. My next book on the list is called Game, Set, and Match. And we actually have a couple of these books laying around the house. And this book here has all kinds of tips from coaches, some of the greatest players of all time, Grand Slam champions. It has tips on when you're selecting a coach. It has tips on how to hit a tweener. It has, tips from Mark Philippoussis, who was one of the greatest servers of all time, on how to, hit second serves. Pete Sampras, the list goes on and on. Even Roger Federer's mother shares a tip on how to be a great tennis parent. So the book, Game, Set, and Match, has all kinds of little tidbits from the pros, from coaches, that as a player, a parent, or a coach, definitely a must read. And definitely, as I mentioned, we have a couple of them laying around the house, so if we ever want to pick one up and have a quick look at something, that's our go-to book. So definitely recommend Game, Set, and Match. One of the quotes that I really like from this book, and it's important, I think, as tennis players, as you try to find a coach that works for you, is from Jo-Wilfried Tsonga, who was a former Australian Open finalist, and it's on how to choose your coach. You need someone who will motivate you. You're alone on the court. Every decision you take is down to you. So you need a coach to give you a way to think and also to motivate you every day and to make sure that your work is consistent. You're human, so it's important that you work with someone you like. I need a good relationship with my coach, as otherwise I can't work. So great quote from Jo-Wilfried Tsonga there. Definitely something to think about as a parent or as a child, or if you're older looking for a coach that you want to work with, make sure it's a good fit for you. And the final book I'm going to recommend is called The Inner Game of Tennis by Timothy Galloway. And I read this book again probably about 7, 8, maybe 9 years ago. This book was written in 1974, so it's definitely stood the test of time. And in the book, basically, the reason I read this book, I can't remember who recommended it to me, but Timothy Galloway kind of shares some tips on how to play the game of tennis and not feel like you have to worry about technique all the time. So, we keep going back to this technique thing, and when we started out our journey, like, I had no tennis experience at all, so I had to find ways to help the kids get better at tennis and maybe not be as strong in the technical piece of the game. So reading The Inner Game of Tennis gave me the confidence in knowing that, I don't need to be a technical expert. And the book's about basically there's two people, two of us in each of us. Like, there's a self one and a self two. Self one is that person that's always talking and yapping and saying, oh, great shot, or terrible shot, or why did you hit it in the net, or come on, get your serve in. That's self one. And self two is our subconscious mind that kind of just does things automatically. Our body is very intricate. It knows how to do things. So sometimes maybe self one needs to be a little quieter. And that's one of the things that you learn in the book, is that maybe, don't judge everything that you're doing as a player. And if you hit a ball in the net, just say to yourself, that needs to improve, or I need to hit it higher next time. Don't get down on yourself. So he really explains that well. The other thing that I loved about this book is that as a coach, you don't need to really worry about technique. You can show a player where they're supposed to hit the ball and then do one or two quick demos to show them how it looks, and then you just feed them the balls and let their body figure out how to get it to. So if you're hitting the ball deep cross court, they'll start realizing my body needs to do this, and all of a sudden it'll start to morph. And sometimes the less you say is better as a coach, and just let the body and the player kind of find the way that works for them. So definitely a great read. It is a little deep, but it does teach you a lot of great things as a player or a parent or a coach. I definitely would recommend. And my favorite quote from that book is this: when we plant a rose seed in the earth, we notice that it is small, but we do not criticize it as rootless and stemless. We treat it as a seed, giving it the water and nourishment required of a seed. When it first shoots up out of the earth, we don't condemn it as immature and underdeveloped, nor do we criticize the buds for not being open when they appear. We stand in wonder at the process taking place and give the plant the care it needs at each stage of its development. The rose is a rose from the time it is a seed to the time it dies. Within it, at all times, it contains its whole potential. It seems to be constantly in the process of change, yet at each state, at each moment, it is perfectly all right as it is. So whether you're coaching or whether you're a player or you're coaching a player or you're a parent, let the process happen. And that quote really explains that. So those are my 5 must-read tennis books for 2021. I hope you enjoy this. I'd love to hear if you read any of those books and what you thought of them in the comments. Also, if there are any tennis books that you have read that you would love to share, please leave those in the comments. Cade and I would love to hear what those are. In the meantime, make sure you click the like button, subscribe. We love creating this content for you guys. So we will see you in the next video.